Hello and welcome to Weekly Open. I'm Brian. We got Don and Cred on the line. This episode is brought to you by FTX, and we're going to talk about that because they've been our long-term partner and they got some stuff going down this week. We want to be open and transparent and have a conversation about what that means. First, let me say hello to Cred and Don. How you doing, guys?
I mean,
It's
how
a
do you answer
day.
this question?
It's a day.
It is a day. It is
Stuff
a
is
day.
happening.
But ignoring crypto, all good. That's what I'm going to say.
I think, listen, I'm going to preface this with two important points. I feel the first one is that we have no special information, despite the agreement we have in place. We don't have any insider views or informational flows that you don't have. We're just like you, stuck on Twitter, pressing refresh, hoping for something. And the second point is as part of whatever agreement we have in place, it doesn't involve forming our opinions. You know, there isn't some sort of foot soldier clause where it's like when something goes wrong, you have to go out and fight and defend the reputation XYZ. So we're always have and they're still at complete liberty to speak, you know, freely and transparently and critically as we will. So just wanted to kind of get that out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to just kind of talk about what's going on and where we are with things, because this show, as you see right there, is sponsored by, partnered with FTX, has been for a long time, over a year, I think. And what we're seeing going on right now is some kind of quasi-war between CZ and Sam. Some really weird stuff going on with Alameda deposits and withdrawals connecting to FTX hot wallets. There was a period this morning where withdrawals weren't happening for 2 or 3 hours. The hot wallets were pretty dried up, and then there was reporting on it by the block, and then withdrawals started happening again. A lot of affirmation from FTX, at least like a day or two ago, that everything was backed, everything was safe. A lack of communication this morning, which is frustrating. The one channel that I do have access to people at FTX with, I expressed that they needed to communicate quickly based on what I would call a increase of concern that I see in the community, where, you know, if you start having people that trust you trust the exchange, not typically a skeptic or anything, and they're like, hey, am I supposed to be like moving money off of FTX? That's never a good response, right? Like, you never want that to be the case. And so communication should always be a priority. And if there's not communication, then we better get some damn good reasons why there's not once things settle down. There's nevertheless, there's a lot going on. I think there was definitely a bank run. So people withdrawing out of rightful caution, I think, because they don't want to get luned. They don't want whatever, like, there's scars, right?
Or Celsius.
Yeah, they don't want to get Celsius, block 5, whichever way. So that's what people are doing, and that can put stresses on, I think, like some of the best organizations. Because, for instance, if you keep and I don't know this, I don't have special information, if you keep like customer funds locked in a completely different place, right? You have to have multiple people, you have time locks, all these things, and you put a percentage of those backed funds over there because that keeps them safer. Then that can take time to like unroll. But what needs to happen is like much more thorough communication that's occurring right now. So that's what I would expect from FTX. I personally have money on FTX. I've not attempted to move it. I don't really have concerns over those funds. I have concerns over the communication, and I'm wondering what's happening new within the like last 12, 24 hours that is different than before. I have seen some evidence this morning, like I don't know if y'all saw Birch like initiated 2 withdrawals in the past day. One like an hour ago that was on chain, it was processed instantly. One last night that was a wire and it processed just fine. So I haven't actually seen evidence of stuff like people going unfulfilled for long periods of time or anything like that. But there needs to be communication. In the meantime, um, I, what do y'all have anything to add there? Like, are you annoyed, pissed off? Do you think they're doing things wrong? Like, what should we be discussing here?
I mean, in my opinion, right? Like I still think it's very, very unlikely that any of the insolvency kind of rumors are true.
Right.
But
The liquidity rumors must be true.
Yes, I mean it's obvious that that is true, right? That they don't have basically that they have to liquidate stuff, or like send stuff, or it takes a while, right? Like that doesn't have me too concerned, but like you said, the communication blackout has me concerned, right? Because Sam tweets a lot usually. He's not been tweeting in the last, I don't know, it's been a while, and that's a little bit worrying, but. I mean, in general, like I'd be very, very surprised if you offered me like a bet. Okay, how like 7-1. This is like FTX is still solvent or is gonna come out of this. Okay, then I'd take it, right? But it's like I'm still like I don't like how it's communicated. I hate it, and we'll see what caused that. So that's my only concern, really. But then again, I don't really have any money. Like I don't have any trades going. I withdrew like pretty much my crypto money like quite a while ago because I'm not trading right now. So like it comes from a privileged standpoint. If I had money on there, I don't know how I'd be thinking about it, because then obviously you're a little bit more stressed, right? And the more money, the more percentage of your portfolio you have, the more kind of this blackout of communication is going to worry you. And I totally get that.
Yeah. I mean, this is why forever I've talked about the Horcrux method, if you will, where you keep your net worth of crypto in different places. So in any one failure that you may or may not be able to predict the potential outcome for, you have your buckets in different places, no matter what. Like no matter how much you like an exchange or like a certain protocol or whatever, if you have everything in one spot, that can be dangerous. But the same as you, like I don't have any concerns over solvency. I don't like that, like some people are saying in the chat, that like one person says, well, my stuff was out in minutes, and then someone else says I waited 10 hours. And I don't know if there's like stresses on withdrawal mechanisms. Like they pride themselves on being a lean company. So like what kind of stresses is this just putting on completely normal systems? And then to what degree is it an actual liquidity crunch where they're needing to like tap into cold storage? Like that's an example of where somebody was bringing up like the hot wallets aren't being topped off by FTX cold storage. They're being topped off by like the Alameda run between the couch cushions funds. And I don't understand what that's about. I really want answers on like what the hell is going on with the Alameda FTX situation. There's a lot of stuff to answer. We don't have all of those answers, but anyway, that's where we are. We're just trying to be transparent about like what we're looking at and what our, or at least what my concerns are. But we're not just like, what I'm not willing to do. One is I'm not going to partner with somebody for more than a year and then just be like, all right, we're like not partnering with them now. Like just for today, just let them figure it out. You know, I'd rather just talk about it. Just meet something head on. Like freaking Twitter is acting like I'm a team member of theirs anyway. So I'm not, which I'm not. So I might as well just approach the whole thing from an honest perspective. So, so that's what I'm doing.
I still think the episode should be renamed to Bank Run on Bankman. That seems much more suitable as a title if we're going to go down that way. I also think, let me know if you object, but for the record, and maybe people will look back on this episode, I hope it doesn't end up becoming iconic, but perhaps they will. The future historians of crypto. I've kind of written out a short summary of events, of most of the details of how we sort of ended up here and what transpired. And maybe I just read that out so we kind of have our bearings, and for the benefit of present audience who aren't obsessed with crypto as we are, and perhaps future listeners as well. So again, some of this has been shortened, and I'm sure I missed out on some details, but the basic premise is as follows. First of all, a CoinDesk article surfaced, which saw a snapshot of Alameda researchers' holdings, which showed they were holding a bunch of very large amounts of stuff that would be illiquid if they tried to sell it at any size. That included both locked tokens and also tokens like FTT, Sol, Serum, etc., which are and also Oxy, Maps, FIDA, and a bunch of sort of Solana
Sam
ecosystem
coins.
garbage. Yeah, Sam coins. And the only other bit of context there that's worth considering is that there's always been an unclear at best relationship between FTX and Alameda. You'll recall in the early days, Sam's kind of Twitter handle used to be SBF Alameda or Alameda SBF or something like that. And the initial mechanism by which FTX kind of bootstrapped itself was via Alameda Research, which was its kind of concurrent quant trading firm, market making firm. And they were also running kind of OTC services for them, which is what gained them notoriety in the first place. And so obviously for regulatory reasons and for customer and consumer trust purposes, that they've attempted to distance and kind of have a gap between Alameda and FTX. And a lot of that is, again, for straightforward transparency purposes, and also to hopefully mitigate, or in their mind, mitigate the idea that there is a trading firm with some sort of privileged rights, access, information, or whatever, that's trading against the customers of the exchange. Now, I think it's completely reasonable to be cynical about the degree and efficacy of that separation between Alameda and FTX, and that relationship hasn't always been clear, and it was kind of buried to a large extent outside of some people who remember the early origin stories. But for those wondering, what's the crossover? You know, if all of this is like, let's say, Alameda related, or why is Alameda topping up the FTX hot wallet, whatever it may be, where does that relationship stem from? And it stems from the origins. That piece of context is important. So this article comes up saying that Alameda is holding a bunch of Sam coins and FTT and locked coins and Solana ecosystem garbage and so on and so forth. And as a result, the market sold off those names because they didn't like them. Like, I think Alameda said they marked them down 50%. And to be honest, with the amounts they were holding, they tried to sell them in any kind of orderly fashion. It would be impossible, right? If you look at the book depth, it just doesn't make any sense. Those are fundamentally illiquid positions. And as a result, the market started selling those names as a result of the article and all the other kind of follow-on speculation. Caroline, who's the new CEO of Alameda Research, she came out, and I hope they don't mind me using their first names or whatever. I'm not on first names terms with these people, but I think Caroline.
It's her Twitter handle. It's like
right, yeah,
Caroline.
Exactly. Caroline Capital. So she came out and put out some clarification tweets about their capitalization, their balance sheet, how they'd returned some loans, how some of their hedges weren't mentioned in the article, and that generally speaking, they were healthier than that article portrayed. And that seemed to have calmed markets a little bit until CZ, who's the CEO of Binance, came out and said that Binance was going to sell their stake of FTT, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is about 500 million or something like that. And they said
500 million left. I guess it was
500 million left. Yes. Yeah. And they had more than that and had been selling it leading up to the event as well. So
we've been selling. We are now going to be selling.
We're really selling now, yeah. So I guess he went a bit more public with it, and there were also accusations floated that Sam, in his lobbying efforts in Washington D.C., was in effect ended up lobbying against his competitors or directly against Binance, or lobbying in such a way that would adversely affect less US-friendly participants such as Binance, which is by far the biggest kind of exchange in the world.
There's something about like billionaires making jabs at other billionaires that do nothing but cost not billionaires money.
This is way above our pay grade for sure.
Yeah.
So that started happening, and listen, CZ did seem properly pissed off by this. You know, you could tell by his demeanor, the types of tweets, the stuff he was liking and engaging with on Twitter. He was not a happy bunny, right? Now Caroline and FTT obviously started being sold off aggressively because of that news that, hey, there's a big seller coming into the market and the fundamentals look bad, and the biggest exchange in the world wants to push their thumb down, feeling wronged on a much smaller exchange, frankly. And so FTT started getting sold off, and it was around the 22 handle where Caroline came in and said, hey, CZ, if you want to reduce the market, CZ in his original tweet said this is going to potentially take weeks and months to reduce the market impact. Again, for our audience, if you try to sell a lot of something very quickly. Your execution and the prices you're going to get for that are, your mileage may vary, as they say. But generally speaking, if you want to get rid of a lot of something quickly, that ends up being sloppy, and sloppy means larger market impact and bigger moves. So as a result, Caroline, again, the CEO of Alameda Research, who already hold a shit ton of FTT, said, hey, we'll buy it off you over the counter at $22. Which was roughly around the market price at that time. CZ didn't take her up on that offer. He kind of ignored that, and then he reacted with an emoji to claims as to whether they could even afford to buy it off him. Then he tweeted something about, are they going to buy BNB? So basically that offer wasn't interesting to him whatsoever, which is already something I find somewhat objectionable, but I'm sure we can get onto that just to finish the history. FTX got rocked. As a result, the outflows from the exchange were huge. There was huge sell pressure on FTT. There was speculation that there may be FTT-denominated loans that might get called as a result on some DeFi protocols and just in general. So that wasn't very good. Sam came out and said, we're fine. We don't lend our customers assets. And the reason for the withdrawal delays that started coming in was that was kind of a technical problem to do with just nodes in general as far as blockchain tech goes, and also wires in the sort of legacy fiat system that take a while to deal with this sudden one-sided sort of demand for people withdrawing from the exchange. Then FTT, the recent developments is that FTT nuked well below Caroline's sort of OTC offer level. It was at 22, and I think it's around the 15 handle now. And that just ended up cascading all the previous behaviors that I described. You had big outflows from FTX, delays and limits on withdrawals, which have, as far as I know, the recent evidence turned to just a suspension of at least blockchain withdrawals, but I mean just withdrawals in general. And you also have this weird behavior of Alameda Research topping up the FTX hot wallets, which had been pretty much empty, which isn't great. And then, as I said, it culminated in FTX pausing withdrawals, and the market is basically waiting for word from SBF or any relevant parties as to, A, as Ledger said, why is there a blackout in communication, but B, just an update on the state of affairs. So that's kind of the quick history there. I know it's a bit long.
I want to add one more thing. We're sponsored by FTX. Aside from all of that, one, we're not sponsored by Alameda. I don't know what's going on with Alameda. And more so, if Alameda did go under, which I don't know that it will, I don't know anything about it, but let's say Alameda was insolvent, in no way should that impact FTX from a functionality or a solvency perspective. And if it does, then that's a huge problem, right?
Yes.
That's something that FTX and Sam needs to answer for, because if he is the primary owner of both, he didn't keep his stuff separate. When I run two businesses, which I run multiple businesses, but if I do stuff from one business and the other business, and I can't keep those things separate from an accounting perspective, that's problematic. If I can't keep those the risk profiles separated, then that's problematic. And those are very, very tiny businesses, not $32 billion valuation businesses. So they need to figure that out, right? Like that would be very problematic if one is a systemic risk to the other.
Yes, and it's also a direct violation of FTX's own full terms of service, which specifically states that the title of your crypto assets, when you deposit them on the exchange, they're yours. They're not for FTX trading. They're not to be used for that. They're simply yours. So if that were in some way to be rerouted to supposedly an unaffiliated quant trading firm, customer funds going towards those endeavors, that's completely inappropriate, probably illegal, and at the very least a violation of terms of service, trust, etc. That's the most unacceptable
ripe
scenario.
for some kind of class action or something.
Oh, absolutely.
If they were not abiding by the terms of service, that would be a big problem.
Yes, agreed. And just as some extra color, I suppose, I mean, the market impact is sort of self-evident. You have worse liquidity in general. You have forced closing of positions and trying to transfer those funds where possible. You have shorts and hedges on other exchanges coming in to protect capital that may not be accessible or isn't at the moment. You also just have this sort of flywheel of speculation that Alameda may be a forced seller of those assets in some kind of liquidation scenario or worst case scenario, or to top off FTX, whatever it may be. And so you have the names that came up in that CoinDesk articles being hammered more than others, such as Solana. And the losers in this, I mean, there are a few. FTX and FTT, obviously one of them. I mean, this is the way it's been kind of handled at the moment is unacceptable. At the very least, from the available information from a kind of customer trust point of view and sort of reputationally, as I said, that's not on. Retail traders and customers of all venues also eat shit because asset prices nuke and the whole thing is just very sloppy. And, if market making firms aren't as willing to deploy and so on and so forth, we saw book depth completely vanish on some exchanges. That means worse execution, worse prices, and just in general, kind of urgency to risk off. And the industry as a whole suffers, right? Because we just look like a bunch of bums where this billionaire backroom lobbying political warfare type of thing means that everyone eats shit. So none of that's good.
To top it off, we've got others participating in the fun. So Arthur Hayes this morning is like, we still haven't had our layman moment. Who's it going to be? And then 15 minutes ago, he said, I just bought some 15K puts.
Like, yeah.
People are enjoying piling on. Like, that's one thing that, Twitter is very ruthless. And when they smell blood in the water, they
it's blood in the water. Yeah, for sure.
So like, it's kind of a waiting game now until we find out were concerns validated, or did everything kind of go back to normal, right? Like, did they process it all? Do they have a recap? Did they communicate what went wrong and why? Where did systems fail? If it was just systems, what type of liquidity crunch existed? And then honestly, from that, we find out, like, is this something that has lasting reputational impact for FTX? Like, and what do people do with their money, right? Is it we talked about Arthur, is it a BitMEX moment? Like, BitMEX eventually just lost reputational reputation, and people left, right? Like, people went and traded their perps elsewhere because of a variety of reasons. But what happens here is the question. So that's what we're waiting on. We're literally just like everyone else, waiting to find answers. I certainly want answers.
You and everyone else, mate.
But we did finally get the decoupling that we were waiting on.
Don was very happy about that one.
It was a little bit ironic, but we finally did get a little bit of a move opposite to the S&P. But I want to say, like, in general, this whole thing just casts a really bad light on crypto. It's not like we constantly cast a bad light on crypto, right? As in, like, the crypto community as a whole. Like, there's drama after drama, and it kind of looks like there's just a bunch of children kind of running the show. And this is no different, right? Because at the end of the day, either, like, I think in my head at least, there's two outcomes to this. Either CC just basically caused a bank run on FTX, which damaged pretty much everyone. Like, prices have been going down. People have had to close their positions. People are panicking. It's a shit show, right? Either that is the case, and obviously that's not a good look, or, like, FTX does have real problems, and that's also a bad look, right? There's no good outcome of this. It's like, not like it's okay. Maybe we can avoid all the kind of pitfalls. This is just shit. Like, this is just not a situation you want to be in. And it comes after Free AC has basically been liquidated. It comes after Voyager's kind of been completely wrecked. And it comes during a time where we already have, like, negative spotlight on crypto, right? So, like, either way, this is bad news in my eyes. And it's obviously, I think the way it's been handled by all the parties involved, right? CC, the same as basically FTX and SAM, because FTX and SAM haven't been communicating. CC just, for some weird reason, felt like doing it all public. Could have just done an OTC deal. I don't know why you would kind of say, hey, we're not going to take that if it's offered to you. Just seems very petty.
He clearly didn't want to take it. Like,
yeah,
he had other plans. And
that's when his premise of "I'm just a builder, I don't have time for drama," that's when that's really stretched in my mind. Because the quickest way to resolve away from the drama would be like, hey, I'm not going to, like, diss him for wanting to get rid of his FTT, right? That's his investment decision and Binance's investment decision. And, you know, people buy and sell stuff all the time and theses change, whatever it may be. Fuck it. Even if it were just like a spiteful thing, like you're lobbying behind my back, I'm going to sell my FTT. I think he's completely within his rights to do that. And I find that totally reasonable. But I think if you're then going to argue that you want this to be like a low maintenance, no drama, we're not fighting,
then sell it at $22.
Then just sell it at $22, get the OTC deal done, and the industry can move on. You can focus on building and BNB adoption, all this other stuff, and the industry doesn't suffer as a result. I think when you cross that threshold and avoid taking the easy option, which also gives you a better price, that's when I think it becomes reasonable to question incentives, right?
Yeah. It's like CZ's got his biddle hammer in one hand and his like knife he's twisting in the other, you know?
Yeah.
I find that not productive at a bare minimum. And, you know, CZ's not the victim there. Like if he's doing that, like he's creating victims of people who inevitably are also his customers, right? It's bad for the ecosystem as a whole. And so like Sam made an extraordinarily offensive joke of like, is he even allowed to be in the US to lobby the government?
That was shitty. That was very shitty.
It's like, you know, if Sam like pokes CZ in the eye, is he surprised that CZ comes back with a knife? You know?
Yeah. Or a nuke,
yeah, or a nuke. Like we're not sure yet. And then there's a lot of childishness. My disappointment so far is that based on what, you know, the people that I've talked to at FTX and kind of gotten to know over time, they're supposed to be the adults in the room, right? Like step above, be our representative in DC with your untied shoelaces and whatever, like, but be the adult in the room, be mature, communicate well, be open and honest, be straightforward, and be the adult in the room. And I expect them to do that. And so if they fail to do that, fail to take the high road, fail to communicate well, fail to honor their obligations, then that is not good. And I would need to analyze this on our own to say, like, is this who we want to be associated with or not? Historically, I've never seen anything that like indicated that I would not want to be associated with what they do. But this is their time to show what they're made of, and that's going to have an impact on whether people use their exchange, whether people are ready to step alongside them as they try to recover out of this. And, you know, we learned some truths. Like we need answers for the questions that people are bringing up. There's some people that are bringing up like good questions. There's some people that are just like tossing gasoline on the fire. But Adam Cochran is one person that's brought up like, here, you know, Lawmaster, freaking A, Larry. Like Larry's put out like a whole list of wallets and what's going on. Like I want answers. I want transparency to those things. And then we go from there.
Yeah. I think one thing we also discussed before the call is if there were ever a time to get, even if it's difficult and even if it has negative regulatory, you know, implications for Sam's regulatory effort, whatever it may be, it's time to really come clean about the FTX-Alameda relationship. Like that should have been done from the very beginning, and we didn't get that, and the bull market covered that to some extent. But if there is something sort of nefarious going on there, and if customer funds aren't sufficiently protected or separated from essentially their trading operation, I mean, that's again unacceptable. For me, one of the worst case scenarios. It's a complete betrayal of trust, and that would be that. I mean, look, who would trust frankly speaking, who would trust the exchange after an event like that, right? So withdrawals go from delayed to paused. There's no communication, and then you find out that in violation of their own terms of service, the funds have been going elsewhere, almost in a Celsius-like sort of for speculative purposes or for collateral or for loans, whatever it may be. You know, if you're someone who managed to withdraw their money from that exchange, and yes, the truth does come out and stuff gets fixed and whatever, even in that kind of positive best case scenario, would you put your money back in that type of venue? Like we saw, you brought up BitMEX as an example. I mean, that exchange essentially got left to irrelevance, to put one way, and that wasn't just some like competitor whatever type of exchange. That was the place to trade. That was the home of perpetual swaps, which is still the highest volume instrument that we have in crypto. It was the only game in town for the longest time, and even that sort of, we moved on from that. So there's no sanctity or kind of guaranteed stickiness or loyalty when it comes to users for these things, you know. So that's what I mean. With every hour of this comms blackout, whatever it may be, it's very damaging reputationally, because even if everything does get fixed, resolved, and it was technical, or there's some good explanation, people's trust threshold is going to be much, much higher. Or I guess lower in this specific case, but they're going to want a lot more assurances after an event like this, especially given the recency bias when it comes to Celsius, Voyager, you know, BlockFi, Luna, all this type of stuff. People won't take any unnecessary risks on these things, especially when it comes to choosing counterparties. So I think we really need to see something in the next few hours, at the very latest, to be honest.
Something else I just saw, Adam Cochran was making a comment here about some of the withdrawals that he's seen going through as normal are FTX US, and whether there's some kind of difference there in terms of the function of how that works or what's going on there. And I do wonder if there's something there, like were they operating differently with FTX US versus FTX, the other stuff? Is that called international?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if there's some kind of like fundamental difference in the way those funds are managed or stored or terms of service. I have no idea. But again, it adds questions. It's like, how does the stuff work? How do they differentiate? How are the entities separated? And they should be able to answer those questions better than, for example, Binance, which no one knows where it's based. Like they have, you know, dozens of individualized entities for different jurisdictions. But if you say like where it's Binance, like it's complicated, right? And my expectation for FTX should be, it should not be that complicated. It should be you express how it's all structured and make that quite clear. You're certainly going to have to make it clear if you're going to have proper relationships within U.S., you know, regulatory jurisdictions. So you have to be able to identify this stuff pretty well.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Should we be talking about price now?
Yeah, I mean, like we wanted to be as forthright as we can in terms of talking to the audience. So I feel like we've done that 30 minutes of justice. So Don, can I send the screen share to you and we actually talk about price? You got FTT to start, down 33.5% today.
Yep. I mean, that's the obvious one, right? The obvious one, the first one to look at. Just based on the fact that, yeah, it's down a shitload today. And people are wondering, like, oh, I don't know if anyone's wondering where to buy this. I'm a little bit wondering where to buy this. High time frame wise, there's no real support here, right? Because it was just basically vertical run upwards. I think in general, like an area of support-ish is this like $10 area here. Now, obviously, this all goes out the window if FTX is actually insolvent. You don't want to be buying in that case. But I'm going to be looking like at an entry in that area if I get one. But yeah, it's quite rough, right? This kind of feels like either like if you buy this, you're right, and like if you buy this, you're either right or wrong on basically FTX being insolvent. And if you're right and it goes low, you get a massive mean reverse, like which would kind of reward you with like a 2x, 3x from that point onwards. And if you're wrong, you just lose it all, basically, right? Like I said, I don't really think the chances of it actually being the case, like as in FTX being insolvent, are high, at least not in my mind. So I want to take that trade if I get it, right? So anything down here interesting to me. If we get a little bit more of like a push downwards, I'm not entirely sure if we're gonna get it, to be honest. But I like the thing is, in these kind of situations, I don't have to take the trade. That's why I'm just kind of like, if it gives me one where I'm like, okay, I can throw something in. If it goes to zero, it goes to zero, and I will have a great entry. If it doesn't, then yeah, I mean, I'm just waiting for that to happen. In general, like this whole like drama and this whole stupid situation has caused everything to go down. And this is the first time, like we talked about, like the decoupling, whatever. But it's actually like it's been a while, right? Where the S&P on the weekly is massively green. It's going up as we speak, right? And Bitcoin
The decoupling
obviously
we
doing.
deserve.
Yeah, really. Like
S&P up on news that crypto is going away.
I mean, that's like, look at that. Like that's 3 red candles on the daily for Bitcoin, and then you go on the S&P. Obviously, like this is Friday still, but still, like this is quite the difference. And Bitcoin is still bleeding, right? It's not like this has slowed down even on the lower time frames. And I think this is all basically obviously news related. If we have like FTX in trouble, you don't want to be in crypto, basically. So if you think FTX is in trouble in general, I mean, you would expect lower prices in my eyes. And just from a TA perspective, this is kind of shit spot to be in, right? Because we have the support that's been tested a shitload of times, and now we're testing it again. Not the best. And the next support's quite far away. Like the
And I
next
guess
support,
the other side of that is if you expect this to blow over, then there's a discount on crypto basically relative to
yes,
the legacy
Oh.
correlation.
yes, I think that is in general the case. It's just the question of, I mean, we're in general in such a shitty situation globally, because everyone's just kind of like, okay, the S&P is probably going to go lower, or like in general, we're kind of uncertain about a lot of things. So it's not even just crypto related, right? If you're making a bet here at support and you're like, okay, this is discounted relative to the S&P, there's also a chance that the S&P is just going to dump, right? Not because, okay, Bitcoin front ran it, but just because we're in a shitty situation globally all around. But yeah, I do agree with you. Like, if you think the S&P is going to go up, and if you think this whole situation is going to blow over, then it's probably a discounted buy, and it's a discounted buy into support. It's not the best support anymore, just based on the fact how many times it's been tested. But like usually these kind of days I would buy. Like if I don't believe the rumors to be true, I would buy this kind of dump, because if they are proven to be wrong, you're probably going to get a really nice candle to the upside. If they're confirmed, however, you're obviously gonna be eating.
Yeah, this is
shit.
just like a catalyst trade, right? Fundamentally, especially for the FTT side of things, that's probably going to be the main driver. Like if some clarification / good news comes out about solvency, financial position, whatever, that thing probably flies, and a lot of the open interest, really aggressive positioning that's built up in that token gets wiped. The event is itself mean reverting, but also because of the future structure and positioning there, that'll sort of add fuel to the fire. And if not, and I think the longer, there's also like an uncertainty premium, if you will, or discount. Like the longer it lasts, the worse it is for the market. They're like, why aren't they updating anything? Oh, is it a lawyers telling them not to? And you get into all sort of second order inferences about these sorts of things. So I think it's definitely lends itself well to a catalyst type of trade more than anything, at least before the dust settles.
One other element here that I don't know if y'all are paying attention to, but it's pretty significant today, is there's midterms in the US. So that could be part of what the market is pricing, which the market typically likes when nothing happens legislatively. So the House is likely to go Republican, the Senate's a toss-up, but those two are both in the mix, and the gubernatorial races, I guess, are leaning slightly Democratic. But both the House and the Senate have been Democratic with a Democratic White House, so that's theoretically meant that they could pass things, even though they haven't. But when the two are split, it's just going to make it impossible to pass anything, and markets typically like that. So there might be some like resolution here in terms of the political uncertainty. You're just kind of reaffirming that you're not going to pass anything that has a huge impact on markets, basically. And those races are happening today. So that could be a good bit of what's going on from the legacy side of things in terms of why the market's pumping, is because the House looks like it's going to go red.
Yeah, the setup was good in Legacy, right? You have like midterm seasonality and Republican kind of skew, which is historically like pretty decent. The S&P bounced. If you can pull up that high time frame chart, Don, yeah, exactly. Like on the monthly or the weekly or whatever, the S&P bounced from where it like should have bounced, purely technically speaking. So the setup was there, like good seasonality plus good technicals on the S&P at the point at which it mattered most. That would have been and crypto itself before all this unfolded, it was like in an area of resistance, but at least you had like breakouts across the board, and you had price sort of above that 21K resistance at the very least, and you had like a breakout. But since then, yeah, that entire setup got wiped. Which is unfortunate, because we could be talking about sort of range high prices, and some altcoins looked very close to continuation, like Chili's or whatever it's called was at its range high, and some other stuff was looking like technically it had legs. But yeah, you can just, if you scroll through any watch list, the entire market's feeling this, which sucks, because we've relied so much on S&P correlation to at least drag us out of the mud, and the one time they do that, we come up with our own concoction of shit to not participate.
We wouldn't be guessing if the Dixie was showing this, which is the most apparent breakdown style candle we've seen in a long time. We wouldn't probably be thinking Bitcoin's at 19K unless it was off of a floor of like 14K. I think we would have been predicting there's a bounce here. So, and I think there would be if this drama wasn't going on. But associated with the legacy market, there might be a trade here for crypto if the dollar continues to weaken. Yeah, you mean, does this look like broken down or just kind of refreshing itself here to y'all?
I think it could take a while. Like, I think it's going to go sideways here more than anything. I don't think it's broken down necessarily, but I think it's ready to take a breather more than anything. The funny thing is, like, crypto-wise, we're just stuck in this loop of, okay, is like this whole price action is basically dictated by, okay, is FTX solvent or not, or is it like fucked or not? And as long as there's no news, I think we're gonna suffer compared to the S&P. So, yeah, it's just what it is. But yeah, traditional markets look good to me. The dollar looks weak, or at least like it wants to range, so we'd have some upside on that front. It's just, yeah, we kind of screwed ourselves on that one. The two billionaires in our midst anyway.
We're good at that, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like 95% crypto-specific price action at this point, probably more, and everything else, all this macro stuff, normally, as important as it is, we don't have that. It almost feels wrong to say we don't have the luxury of caring about macro at the moment, because we have our own problems in our own home.
That's just how we'll go down.
Said,
yeah. As legacy turns, though, if it goes down, then we'll just keep going down.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like, look, if you want the script writers to put in some like apocalypse type of scenario, it's like, look, the FTX-Alameda situation is as bad as you thought. Oh, and by the way, CPI is going to come in really hot, and dollar rips, and equities puke, and yeah, I mean, come on, that's yeah, a bit of a disaster type of scenario. And I think CPI comes out on Thursday, right? But I think until we get this resolved one way or another, the price action's going to be almost entirely dictated by the market pricing in chances of, solvency, insolvency, their liquidity conditions, and so on and so forth, which isn't a great thing for if you want a list of things that are a toss-up, the solvency of one of the bigger exchanges and quantitative trading firms in the space ideally shouldn't be very high on that. But this is crypto, so here we are.
That's a nice drawing there, Don.
Yeah, I mean, this just kind of sucks, right? Just looking at this, it's like, do you really want to take another trade at this range low? I think the only reasonable stance for taking it along at this range low is basically you're like, okay, this is all FUD. This is bullshit, and it's going to mean revert, or it's going to go back up. And I think that's not the worst, but given how weak we've been in general compared to everything else, for me, there's no trade to be taken here. I definitely don't want to short into like a situation where I think it is probably FUD, or at least like not entirely true. So like I feel like the market is kind of pricing in something that doesn't have to be priced in. But I also definitely don't want to buy this just from a TA's perspective, right? Because this is just garbage. This looks like Bitcoin looked at 6K, right? If you remember back. Where it just like back in 2018, where it just grinded on 6K support over and over and over again, and every single bounce was weaker and weaker and weaker. That's what we're doing now, at least a little bit higher price-wise, but I mean, it just looks too similar and feels too similar, and makes me hesitant to get involved. Even though, like I said, I think there would be a play to be made on the news front, but I don't want to. I just don't feel like it.
Support on top of Cred and I's head.
Yeah. Some
Oh,
small
yeah.
brains
window.
holding this thing up.
Meanwhile, gold.
No, this is not okay. This is not okay. Stop it.
Don is like, the biggest exchange can face liquidity crises, but gold going up, that's where I draw the line. You know?
That is where I draw the line. Oh,
2% today after recovery previously as well. Rates.
Peter Schiff must be just bathing in
Yeah.
vibes.
Rates double topping maybe. I feel like this is like a regime shift type price action personally, for politically related. So see if it can like last longer. But all of that is pretty nicely correlated. Like rates looking toppy, Dixie looking toppy, gold looking bottomy, markets looking strong. Like that's a proper recovery trade. Like one of the first times where all of those things kind of line up together versus the market's having an up day and rates are still soaring, you know? So that makes me wonder if there is something more constructive here for Dixie sideways or downside and other markets having some opportunity for recovery, within which you would hope that that the crypto might have a trade. I guess one thing you could look at is like, where can you take the trade in crypto if you seek it? And I don't know, question for y'all is Ethereum a better place to take the trade than Bitcoin? Certainly than like Solana. Solana is somebody would say like whenever there's a problem, people just sell their Solana to try to cover it. So like maybe there's altcoins that you don't want to dive into. Maybe is Bitcoin too much of a collateral asset? Is there a trade there for Ethereum to play a role in that recovery? What do y'all think?
I think ETH's probably a little bit like a leverage bet on Bitcoin. I think it's gonna, if Bitcoin goes up, ETH's gonna go up more. If Bitcoin crashes, ETH's gonna crash pretty hard, I think. So it's kind of like you're risking more to gain more kind of situation. But in general, ETH's been a pretty good bet over the last few years. And I mean, I've pulled this chart up a couple times on this show already. This is like the ETH BTC chart, and it's trending up, right? And it's been trending up for a long time. And I think in general, like over a longer time period, it's probably gonna go like higher. It's just a question of, does it go higher from here? Does it go lower first? Or does it like all of this could happen to, like, in my eyes. I think in general, it's gonna go higher against Bitcoin. It's just a question of when, which does make it an interesting bet. Problem is the downside to like the support where I think it should be holding is like 50% against Bitcoin, which would not be fun if you're holding it. So this is quite difficult for me. That's why I'm just kind of treating it as a leveraged Bitcoin bet, because I think the downside is still too large to justify. Like, I mean, the upside is basically 2x, and the downside is 50% down, and I think both are reasonably likely. So there's no trade for me here yet. If it gets discounted or if it just goes sideways for a while, that trade gets more and more attractive to me. So right now, I don't really know is the answer for ETH. I don't know how you guys are looking at the ETH BTC chart or the relationship at all, but yeah, it's hard.
I don't know. For me, given how fundamentally driven the market is right now, for bad reasons at the very least, if I'm going to trade this thing this week, it has to be a catalyst trade off of news or headlines. I think just like a lot of technical stuff was disregarded on the way down, as you'd expect. I think if there's going to be a reversion, or probably blast through the initial levels that people might be looking at from a purely technical point of view, be that support or resistance. So I'm sort of all hands on deck, notifications on type of thing. And I think if you're going to try to catch a piece of this, I mean, obviously do so carefully, because liquidity conditions and these sorts of things, and especially news trading, and in general across exchanges at the moment, isn't that great. But for me, I'm looking for clarity one way or another, and then taking a sort of 5 to 1 hour holding window, maybe a bit longer depending on what the news is. But that type of trade, should we actually get some meaningful communication either from the FTX side, Alameda side, maybe if their counterparties start coming out and saying things, whatever sort of tangible on that front, that's I think where my focus is at the very least.
I'm just reading Twitter. I don't know. Yeah, the Bitcoin chart just looks so much worse to me that even though you said earlier, Donna, this looks like a leverage chart for ETH BTC, I'm more comfortable there personally. Although I'm sure you're right on the downside component, ETH BTC could get quite wrecked. On a day like today, though, it should be doing that, and it's only, I don't know, 1.5 different. But the upside is much more significant. So I don't know. I think we need to see whether this correlation kicks back in, because legacy stuff does look so much better. It gives some merit, I guess, to the severity of this from a drama perspective, that you're seeing it price crypto markets at a severe discount, like basically a 10% 24-hour discount, maybe more, in terms of the risk profile that investors with real money are presenting this as. Is there really anything to where do we go from here? What are we looking for? Resolution?
News, resolution, something. Even if it's the worst thing in the world, just give it to me, you know? The silence makes me very uncomfortable. Silence in my brain always means lawyers, and I don't like lawyers. So hopefully, yeah.
Didn't you study law?
Yes, exactly. My undergraduate degree is in law, which is why all the more reason to hate it. Gotcha. But yeah, especially look, you have to compare kind of habits as well. Sam doesn't sit on these things for the most part. Like, even if there's some half-baked FUD floating around on Twitter, he'll usually, if it generates enough traction, i.e. if Hasaka tweets it, he'll kind of go in and clarify from small technical stuff about browser issues, as funny as that meme is, to anything else. He's fairly clued in on top of it. And that was actually a large part of FTX's growth strategy, was that Sam himself was very much involved in like threads and DMs and that type of stuff. Very plugged in and very on top of it and very responsive. So the fact that that's the kind of baseline we're used to, and now it's more important than probably ever before to be clear when it comes to communications, and we don't have anything. I personally, there better be a damn good reason, but I don't think that list of damn good reasons is particularly long. So yeah, I resolution, I think, to answer your question, or clarity, whatever synonym you want to use.
Yep.
Basically the same for me. I mean, it's just as shitty as this is to say, I don't think there really is a trade unless you want to front run that. But you don't really have to. It's much more comfy to just chill and give it the room it deserves, because this is quite a big thing. And I mean, once it's resolved, it's going to be clearer price action again. Until then, you're at the mercy of news, which, I mean, is always kind of risky if you're coming from a PA background, right? If you're good at trading news, trade news. But if you're good at trading TA and PA, it's not necessarily the best time to do business when you know that there's a bunch of shit that could fly your way that you don't really factor in. Because if your stop losses are based on TA and PA, if your entire strategy is based on that, I mean, what are you going to do in this kind of market? The answer is like not really anything. And given I'm not the news trader, I'd much rather see how the news plays out. If there's weakness or weakness or strength, basically relative weakness, or if it's like, if the positive news leads to like further selling, or the other way around, then you can kind of do something with it. Until that happens, it's not really too clear to me. And then I'd just rather get the info and trade off the info before I do any kind of wild speculation on something that I don't really understand.
Yeah. That makes sense. Resolution. Sounds good. Let's do it. That's all we got. Thanks everybody for hanging with us. Hope you enjoyed it today. Trying to bring you what we can. One other thing I've been asked a couple times in the chat, are we having an up only with SBF? It's a different podcast, different stakeholders. But yeah, we are trying to orchestrate that. He said he would come on. We got put in a chat. Not much has been said since then. So we've had the same number of hours of silence since Twitter has. So we are trying to get him to confirm that he can come on, and we will ask him questions if he does.
I'm sure that's top of his list right now, Legend,
sure
right?
Very, very high on the list. You know what, though? It should be, because he owes answers to the community. And
Yeah,
I think
right.
Up Only provides a good venue for getting the real community to pay attention. So he should get his ass on there. That's my opinion, at least, but it's my podcast. So obviously I have that opinion. Thanks for being here. And yeah, we'll catch you next time. You can go to weeklyopen.com, catch episodes. You can dislike this video if you hate us, do all those things. But we'll see you again next episode. Later.